can see us, but we can't see them.
Oh,
10 viewers.
10 viewers. Okay,
Hello.
so it changed.
Hi, guys. I'll just be here behind my coffee mug and Scott's hand.
We are fresh out of bed for the sake of this, so we are super scruffy at the moment. Well, at least I am. So that's how much we love you, people that we can't even see.
Let me find the questions here. Excellent.
Someone needs to tell us if they can hear us.
Yeah, Lillian says we're live.
Oh, okay, good.
Okay. You riff. Over to you, Lynch.
Yeah, behold the glamorous morning life of authors. We are here on scenic Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts, where we are both, well, I'm an instructor at the Viable Paradise Writing Workshop this year, and Elizabeth Bear is my gorgeous +1.
Aww.
And the festivities have not actually properly started yet. We are still getting set up and arriving mostly today. Okay. And we will be bending their brains and teaching them things for the next 4 or 5 days. It's myself, Patrick and Teresa Nielsen Hayden, Lord Nixon, Steve Bruce, Jim McDonald, Deborah Doyle, and Sherwood Smith. And we have special guest stars Elizabeth Bear and Steve Gould.
Scott's not actually this much larger than I am. He's just leaning way forward.
I'm vast.
I'm suffering from perspective. Just draw lines of perspective.
Do my Jim Butcher impersonation.
And I think everybody's probably getting a don't do that.
Oh. I'm practicing my author photos. I'm sorry. Please continue.
I have no idea what I was saying. I think I was about to apologize for the refrigerator noises behind us. This was
yeah, this is our kitchen.
Best we could manage in our tiny rental suite here. It was this or the unmade bed, so count your blessings.
I just pride myself that it'll be better than Joe Abercrombie's Hangout no matter what happens. So at least you got that going for you.
I'll be over there. You can trash talk your colleagues.
Colleagues. I have no colleagues, only victims. Well, you're a Gollancz author now too, aren't you? You're different. No, she's trying to reach the knife drawer is what she's doing. Okay, so we should answer some questions. We should cease your tomfoolery.
Well, perhaps we should introduce ourselves. Oh, okay. Perhaps I should be allowed to talk for a moment.
Okay, why don't you introduce yourself? This will be good. This will be good. She's gonna introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Bear. I write science fiction and fantasy, as somebody has noted in the questions. And I am currently at work on my first romance, which is called Ancestral Night. It's a sort of Ian Banksian big idea space opera, which I don't want to talk too much about because spoilers.
Because spoilers.
And what are you working on currently, Scott?
Well, actually, I'm working on My Book is Awesome, which is also an Ian Banksian space opera for Gollancz.
So you've just discarded this whole Gentleman Bastard.
Oh, those books. Okay.
They're off the table now. You're doing something else. Hearing it here first, Simon. Sorry.
I gotta write Tom Lloyd's next book for him too. I'm Scott Lynch. I'm the author of The Gentleman Bastard sequence, which thus far comprises The Lies of Loch Lamora, Red Seas Under Red Skies, The Republic of Thieves, and the forthcoming Thorn of Emberlane. And I'm working on Thorn of Emberlane at the moment, which I'm told that several people, including myself, I am sitting up straight. See what I should put up with.
I am sitting up straight.
I am. Straight-ish. Straight enough. Anyhow,
You're sitting up heterosexual.
I write books. From time to time.
I have an email here. Possibly it's from Lillian. I think she's about.
Oh, really?
I don't know. Let's see. Oh, okay. We are live on the Real Hangout, she says. So we should better stop goofing off and actually answer some questions. So she's coming to our house. No, it doesn't. She's nicer than Okay, so Mr. Lynch, Adam Pesh of, I don't know, the Eldred. Are they purely background, or will we learn more about them eventually?
Okay. Well, okay, this is sort of spoilery, inherently spoilery question that is sometimes very difficult to answer. I'm not going to confirm or deny that, though.
It's my favorite.
The thing about my fancy aesthetic, the thing about my sense of atmosphere and what I really enjoy is that as both a writer and a reader, really particularly enjoy having every single question provided with an answer. I'd like fantasy worlds to maintain some sense of mystery and some sense of, well, incompleteness is the wrong word, because you don't want to give the reader the impression that you've simply run out of energy or that you've failed to fill in all the blanks. But the world around us has mysterious edges that we're never going to be able to figure out in our own lives. And, you know, I want my fiction to accurately simulate that. And cool stuff that I'm dropping hints to and using to create atmosphere are not necessarily going to have, you know,
There we go.
why on earth was it muted? Oh, okay. I could do that too.
Yes. Okay, we
Okay, so
appear to be back.
we're talking.
There we are.
We're back. Hey.
You could scoot back a little bit, and then I wouldn't be 5 feet behind you. Then I'd just be 3 feet.
Okay, sorry about that. That's the marvelous.
And I would be closer to the knife.
Marvelous connectivity here on Martha's Vineyard is marvelous. And
Martha's Vineyard is basically the Isle of Wight for New England. New England.
Yeah, it's a miracle we have any form of internet connection at all. So you know, you get what you get. Anyhow, the very short answer is that you know, no, I'm not necessarily going to tell everybody everything. And I know that's a disappointment to some people, but I like to think that the way I don't tell everybody everything will hopefully provide some pleasure, at least.
All right.
What's our next question, Elizabeth Bear?
Oh, well, I'm sorry. I was busy answering this or looking at this email.
I'm sure you were.
Our next question, I'm just going to interview you. That'll be the easiest way to do this. Okay. Our next question is from Philip Marshall, who may or may not be from the Isle of Wight. And it's also for you. As more and more fantasy is being adapted to film, surely the Gentlemen Bastards will one day be among that list also. In a dream world, what actors would you like to see portray characters like Sean Locke and Sabitha? The dreaded casting question. How do you get your ideas?
The dreaded casting question, yes. How do you get your ideas? I get them by punching you directly through the screen.
He doesn't actually mean that. That was not a threat, Mr. Marshall.
Are you my lawyer?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes, that was not actually a personal threat.
Definitely my better half. So. All right.
There we are.
The ever terrifying dreamcasting question, in which I must state again for the record that as you know, visual adaptation projects move forward, I'm actually the last guy on earth that anybody would ever want to consult about anything. The role of most authors in most visual adaptations is to collect a check and then piss off to the middle of the woods as fast as possible and never be heard from again.
That's the ideal role anyway.
Well, I mean, that is the ideal role. They pay me money, I leave and never bother them. I'm exaggerating slightly, but you know, I don't have any control over casting, and I will not have any control over casting. And this is why it's always amusing / harrowing for people to, you know, send me, you know, tweets and emails saying, you know, hi, I'm an actor and I'd really like to get in on this, you know, visual adaptation of The Lies of Locke Lamora. And it's like, I'm the last person you should talk to. I mean, you should talk to your mom before you talk to me. She has more power to get you into this thing. Anyhow, I try very hard in my head not to actually cast the major roles in the series so that I don't actually end up writing actors on the page. And the other thing is that, you know, it's been 11 years now since the book was, no, it's been 9 years since the book was handed in. It's been 11 years since it was sold. And we've been discussing there have been 2 major attempts to adapt it in the wind during that time. And that's a very long time in terms of pop culture. I mean, the actors we were you know, bantering about 10 years ago, you know, have moved on in their careers or aged out of the roles. And you know, you ideally need somebody for, say, Locke and John, who were, you know, you need 2 actors who were in their relatively early to mid 20s. And if you wanted to do the entire sequence, you know, you need them to be able to age with the sequence, you know, into the 30s and beyond.
And we're old and have no idea who the good 20-something actors are.
And basically, yeah, if you're under 36, we've never heard of you. We're old now. When
that
it comes,
hot young actor Johnny Depp.
The hot young actor Johnny Depp, who's like 51 now. When we, well, now for minor roles, I do sometimes specifically like peg an actor's image or an actor's voice or something to it. Like Jasmer Moncrane in The Republic of Thieves is very specifically, like if I was handing out roles and I was in charge of this sort of thing, I mean, that role was written specifically for an actor named Andre Braugher. Who's one of my favorites. He's on Brooklyn Nine-Nine. He was on Homicide, Life in the Street. He was in the movie Glory, and he's been all over the place. He's brilliant. And Jasper Moncrane is him, you know, visually and in terms of, you know, vocal style. But that's actually not all that common a thing. You know, I take a lot of inspiration from films. I love films. I watch a lot of them, but I don't try to pin my hopes on any specific actor or actress. Just because, you know, all the reasons I've cited, that these things may not get adapted for, you know, 20 years. The actors that I would have in mind, you know, maybe in their 60s by then. Yeah, it's complicated. So I try not to get my hopes up, and I try not to, most importantly, install notions in anyone else's head about who should play these roles.
You should read me one.
Ooh, yes.
I have one there.
From Beatrice. Dear wonderful, awesome, super intelligent, amazing Elizabeth Bear, who is super cute.
That's not what she said. She's paraphrasing.
I'm paraphrasing. I'm embellishing. I'm gilding the lily. Why is it so hard to get your books in the UK? Even online, they're very expensive and not always in stock. I read your Iskrin books from my library and wanted to buy them. The way she wrote it, it reads like Iskrin.
Oh, okay.
I read your Ice-Crine books from my library and wanted to buy them for keeps, especially now that book 3 is coming. Hurrah, but I cannot find them anywhere.
Well, there is an easy answer to that. There is no UK publisher for the Ice-Crine books.
You have a lot to answer for.
Yes, so they are only available in the UK as imports. Actually, at this point, all of my fantasy is only available in the UK as imports, except I think the Eternal Sky books, because Tor has world rights to those. But they didn't do a separate UK edition. They just imported some American books. However, all of my science fiction is available as ebook from Gollancz. And as I said, I am currently working on my first original novel for Gollancz, which will be available in the UK and frustrate all of my American readers.
Mwahaha.
Mwahaha.
Well, for a while.
People in Canada, luck out. is the short form answer.
So someone's going to throw themselves in that money grenade.
Yes, the answer here is publishing juju, licensing juju. Basically, it's like DVD regions. That's the issue. It's not in my control exactly, because if people want to give me money to publish my books in the UK, I am so on board with that.
Ooh, I know. Look, okay.
You've been talking for a while.
Well,
I get to talk for a little while.
You do. But I was going to propose a little something that may solve all of our issues. Okay. Well, no, it's not actually. That this would be helpful for at least 4 other people that I know. Okay, look, UK. Here's how it works. We will ensure that more Elizabeth Bear books get over there if you will provide a US region DVD set of Blake 7.
Oh.
You get on that, and we will provide
I think I've got a bigger fandom than Blake 7 at this point. At least in the US.
Well, you know what? Okay, we'll use
because
this,
we can't get the DVDs.
We'll use this as a starting position. Okay, look. Go to Parliament, talk to the MP for Blake 7, and get back to us, okay?
Do you just want to carry on? You can answer, answer my questions.
Ooh, that would be fun. I would love to answer your questions, but you would not want me to.
Beatrice, who hates us both, also has a question for you.
Oh, okay.
For Scott. Brace yourself. You might want something a little stronger. Do you feel you sometimes suffer for your popularity?
Yes! Oh, thank God, at last someone understands me.
I read lies after many people. There's nothing in here but wood and granite. Okay, do you feel you sometimes suffer from your own popularity? I read lies after many people recommended it at the Fantasy Faction forums without saying anything about what it was about, and I was quite underwhelmed at the time. But recently I read Red Season. This is like a 1-star Amazon review. No. Now he's reaching for the knife. No. All you would do is bruise yourself with that thing.
There's some sort of barrier between us and the audience.
And if you tried to cut your own wrists, all you would do is bruise yourself, because that is the dullest sharp knife.
I'm not frickin' Joe Abercrombie.
At least I hope we're being entertaining. I'm sure we'll get a text if we're not. But I read Red Season, absolutely loved it, and I'm planning to read the others. If Lies hadn't carried the weight of all those expectations, maybe I'd have liked it more the first time around.
Was there a question somewhere in that invective and personal abuse?
Yes. It was do you feel you sometimes suffer from your own popularity? Do you suffer from being...
I suffer immensely.
A New York Times bestselling author with pretty hair and an awesome fiance?
I cried all the way to the awesome fiance. Okay, no, interesting question. Different strokes for different folks. Not every book works for everybody else. And, talk to anyone that you read books with, or anyone who discusses them with you, you will discover that you share wildly divergent opinions, even on books that are widely acknowledged to be classics of art or classics of the genre. I mean, if you take a book like Dune, Dune sold something like 15 million copies in its publication history, and is widely acknowledged as a science fiction classic. Go to any convention panel and take an informal survey. Hold your arm up. Do you like Dune? Do you hate Dune? You'll probably get a 50-50 split throughout the room. And this is a book that you could build mansions out of in terms of number of physical copies in existence. I'm not actually upset by the notion that someone doesn't actually like my work or a portion of my work.
He's sinking his fingernails into his thigh under the table.
I'm punching myself to stay conscious as we talk. It's this is a thing that happens. I mean, not everyone is going to like everything you put out, and it's not always in the author's power to make everyone like everything you put out. There are an awful lot of books that come out every year, many of them written by people that I love personally, that I actually dislike or am really, really cold on, or maybe even detest. So I don't think that this is unusual. I don't think that this is a bad or a weird thing. And it's not possible really for authors to control the amount of hype that builds up. And yes, I mean, this is a thing that does happen, because you've got the sort of the two competing modes of social media operation. in which you want to get the hype ball rolling. You know, people say, "Oh, this was an amazing book. I loved it. You're going to love it too." People naturally, you know, get excited and want to share the things that you know turn them on. And then there's the counter reflex, which is don't get taken in by the hype. Don't become part of the marketing machine for, you know, someone else's you know, commercial push. And so there's inevitably this sort of friction between you know, this book was amazing, I loved it, and it sounds like there's an awful lot of hype. Gee, I'm not entirely sure if I'm going to be able to enjoy this book on its own terms. And I mean, I felt this. I mean, I've come to books that have been, you know, massively hyped as, wow, this is the most amazing science fiction or fantasy book ever written. And I've been left with a very meh sort of feeling. It's one of those things that, you know, I don't think it can be controlled, because it's lack of attention that kills careers. It's lack of attention that means that writers will not be able to you know, continue their work.
I'm sorry, were you saying something?
You're it's also actual murder that prevents writers from continuing their work. And right after this, no, I love you. I really do. It's you know, the lack of attention is the poison, and unfortunately, fortunately or unfortunately, I mean the solution is that you know, we've just got to make noise. We've got to take whatever publicity and whatever marketing and whatever you know, whatever attention we can get, whatever oxygen we can keep flowing to our books and our careers. And if that generates unreasonable expectations of hype, sometimes I guess all I can say is that you've got to take it with a grain of salt. And you've also got to remember that to deliberately work in the opposite direction for a writer may be a form of slow career suicide. Which sounds like I'm putting an awful lot of weight upon, you know, you and your tastes. To confirm, it's totally okay not to like any of my books. Don't tell your friends that, but I give you permission not to like my books. Did what I say make any sense?
I don't know.
Super professional writer Elizabeth Bear, who knows all, tells all?
It's 8 o'clock in the morning. I have no idea.
More coffee. I mean,
is there still coffee to put?
There's still coffee in the, somehow still coffee in the mug.
Somehow, okay. This one is for both of us.
Ooh.
So I think you should read it to me first, because
that'll be fun. Okay.
you talk more than I do.
Is this the bottom one?
Yeah.
Lillian writes, what has been your favorite character to write, and who is easiest to get into the voice of?
Curiously enough, those two things are very unified. Characters who are easy to write, who cooperate, are almost always my favorite characters to write because they're fun to be around. One of those is Jenny Casey, who is the protagonist of the Wet Wired novels, which are available in the UK as ebooks at least, Hammered, Scar Down, and World Wired. And she has this very sarcastic, bantering first-person style that's a little bit noir and a little bit sort of self-conscious, self-deprecating. I don't even know what I already said sarcasm. Word rep. Mm-hmm. But yeah, she's snarky, and that makes her fun to write. Which is also the case with Karen in Karen Memory, which is the book that just came out this past year in the U.S. And you may be able to get in the UK. I think Tor has world rights, but I'm not 100% certain because that's, thank God, my agent's job. I just put words on paper. And she's a character who, the phrase I use is runs toward the sound of gunfire. And those characters are always great to write because they get themselves into trouble. They're the people who, you know, when somebody drives their car into a post, are the people who run toward it to help and get themselves into trouble. And they're great to write because they are self-screwing, not to put too fine a point. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Scott has some self-screwing characters that constantly sabotage their own chances for survival.
Like the protagonist of the Gentleman Bastard sequence, Locke Lamore. I mean, you know, it's obviously I enjoy writing the major characters of the sequence. I mean, I've come to know Locke and John really, really well, and I enjoy playing them against one another. I enjoy playing them separately and individually against the other characters in the sequence. I enjoy bothering my girlfriend as often as possible.
I think I started at that time.
Yeah, you know, reckless characters and characters with little sense of personal survival are actually, you know, go figure, very useful for authors. I mean, George Martin finds them very useful, temporarily.
Reckless is a good way to put it.
My favorite character of all time thus far to write has probably been Zamira Drakasha from Red Seas Under Red Skies, and it's simply because she's got such a vibrant combination of cutting through bullshit and putting and just adding energy to the page, if that makes sense. She's got this you know, fundamental intolerance for the obfuscations of other people that makes her a really interesting foil for, you know, characters like Locke. And, you know, she's in a situation where she's got absolute control in a constantly life and death situation over the lives of hundreds of other people. You know, she's a pirate ship captain, and, you know, she demonstrates that if you break her rules, she will literally grab you by the neck and throw you over the rail. So, I mean, whenever she's on page, it's you know, it's easy to find things for her to say, and it's easy to find the way in which she would say them. And typically there's also a number of minor characters in any one of my books that sort of pop to life like that.
Some of them are cats.
Some of them are cats. I mean, Regal was, well, I mean, Regal was a life portrait of you know, a cat that I once had named Thor. And, you know, basically the cat that's on the page is Thor in all of his, you know, colonizing, presumptuous, life-destroying glory. And, you know, relatively minor characters that you know, add spice to the mix. I mean, Jasper Moncrane was a relatively minor character in the grand scheme of things, but I mean, he was critically important to the flashback plot of Republic of Thieves, and he was great fun to write because I deliberately set out to sort of throw him outside the comfort zone, as it were. Originally, in years back, he was written as much more of a trustworthy mentor figure. And when I looked at what it actually done with characters like Don Moranzala and Father Chains back in Camorra, I realized that the last thing the series needed was another benevolent father figure. And turning Jasmer into more of a bent penny was essential, B, fun, and it really brought the character to life on the page. There's also a couple minor characters in Thorn of Emberlane who are my current favorites. There's a character named Magrim, and there's a character named Jorna, both of whom are veteran soldiers in the service of one of the factions in this book, and both of whom essentially popped to life immediately on the page and began telling me, you know, how they were going to talk, how they were going to act. And it's that feeling you get when a character is, when writing a character is more like channeling or reporting than actually struggling to find words. I think it's very natural for those characters to become favorites.
All right, and on to...
Do we have more questions?
We do.
Oh my God.
We do. Okay. Scott, has fantasy changed as a genre since you were first published?
Well,
Wait. Does this... I'm a finish.
I didn't... You stopped.
I was breathing.
Oh.
I require
way?
oxygen to sustain my oxygen-based metabolism. Yes, I require respiration to sustain my oxygen-based metabolism. All right. Does that change how you approach writing each new book? I'm actually going to jump on this question. I think Scott has changed since he was first published and become a better writer. It's almost like I know I complimented you. You don't know what to do. All right, answer the question.
Okay. As she said, okay, this is...
I'm going to drink water.
You do that.
I can drink water while he talks. It's amazing.
No. What magic is this? Witchcraft! Live on Google Hangouts. It is exactly as Bear has said, and it's kind of surreal because you know, like I said, I started writing lies very seriously 11 years ago now, and it was published 9 years ago now, and that, you know, that's long enough for the wheel to turn in terms of you know, common sensibilities, in terms of commercial sensibilities, in terms of artistic sensibilities. You know, some writers that were relatively big a decade ago have already sort of vanished into the shadows that haunt the genre. And I'm now old enough that, you know, people will say things like, I loved your books. I remember reading them for the first time when I was in high school. Which, you know, authors love to get that.
Or when baby new debut authors come up to you and say, "You inspired me to write," and I'm like,
that's the other surreal thing.
I'll just go out to the ice flow now.
Yeah, you're one of the authors I loved when I was little, and you know, now I'm writing books too. And you do the math, and you're like, you're 30.
Yeah,
it is weird because the genre has also continued to move, and the thing is that when I started writing. In you know, 2003, 2004 is when the serious production of The Lies of Locke Lamora really got underway. And at that point, there was no Game of Thrones television series. Game of Thrones was you know, obviously a gigantic genre success, but it was not yet a vast, popular commercial success that, you know, people who only read 4 books a year or buy them at airport bookstores would dive into.
Hunger Games wasn't a thing.
Yeah, Hunger Games didn't exist. I mean, the Lord of the Rings films had hit really big. But basically everything else that was being thrown up in an attempt to copy that was, you know, crapping out for various reasons. So I was writing relatively freshly with, you know, Game of Thrones as a major influence on me. And that whole notion of, you know, a fantasy world that could be vivid and beautiful and full of detail, and yet also gritty and cruel and, you know, have a fairly realistic expectation of what hereditary aristocracies are actually like, rather than the sort of, you know, gimlet-eyed, you know, traditionally American, you know, love of all things with a title. And 9 years on, that sort of, you know, reaction against the previous decades of commercial fantasy, you know, that grit and that grime and that blood and that violence and that treachery, has become more commonplace.
And now we're reacting against Game of Thrones.
Yes, and now the cycle spins again, and there's a fairly wide scale reaction against what has come to be known as quote unquote grimdark.
I'm actually gonna. Would you steady that?
Yeah.
I'm gonna try it into the camera here, so that there's more of us and less of the
See my
captains.
Daggerfall T-shirt.
There we go.
Some of her.
Hopefully that's a little better for the people at home who are not watching us from here up. We're very short.
We're tiny little people. We're actually hobbits.
No, we just eat like hobbits.
Also true.
Okay, over to you.
So, you know, I mean, the thing is that, you know, commercial and artistic sensibilities do move in these cycles. And this sounds like a really jerky thing to say, but, you know, you ideally have a constant influx of new readers into the genre, people who are just picking up, you know, fantasy for the first time. And so not everybody has a perspective on the fantasy genre that goes back further than a year or 3 years or 5 years or whatever.
You might be somebody's first fantasy novel.
Yeah, you gotta, geez. And,
My first fantasy novel.
and now we know why that person has problems for the rest of their life. And
you monster.
And so they may not see, you know, the greater cycles of, you know, reaction, counter reaction, reaction to the counter reaction, and how it all spins. And it gets a little overwrought sometimes with, you know, oh my God, when will grimdark go away? When will fantasy stop being miserable? Well, it already has. There are already people writing in different veins. And, you know, people will be reacting against them in 5 or 6 or 7 years. It's all one big, gigantic, colorful wheel.
And I actually wouldn't call your work, quote, grimdark, unquote.
No, no.
But there's also this idea, I'm going to interject in Scott's question. I'm going to use my privilege.
Your privilege of being awesome.
My privilege of being awesome, yes. To say that there's also this idea that quote, grimdark or gritty fantasy, or what I like to refer to as high mud fantasy, which I define as fantasy that acknowledges the existence of beard lice and mud, where mud is a euphemism. How can you tell he's a king?
He's not covered in shit.
Is that goes back to the very beginnings of modern fantasy, the absolute beginnings of modern fantasy. The same year The Fellowship of the Ring was published, Paul Anderson published a book called Broken Sword, which was also derived from Norse mythology. There's one rogue strand of hair that keeps slipping into my mouth. And I'm not actually swatting invisible flies. And that book is very gritty. It's mythic, but it's a really interesting example of epic fantasy, epic Norse fantasy, not influenced in any way by the Lord of the Rings. It's also very good. I differ from Michael Moorcock in that I recommend the 1970s revision of it, where Anderson went in and deep purpled a lot of it. He took out 75% of the adjectives and adverbs, basically. Moorcock likes the original version. And I'm not going to wrestle him because he'd win. So.
Yeah, Broken Sword, I think, was actually published by Gollancz.
I think it was.
Lastly, many years ago. I think it's only available used in the UK at the moment. I highly recommend it. Find a copy if you can. And I'm sure that, given all the time and money in the world, my editor, Simon Spanton at Gollancz, would probably publish it again. Because Simon has impeccable taste and likes Paul Anderson.
And it's short. It's wee.
It is.
Small.
It's tiny.
It's traditional fantasy in that it's like 140 pages long. Well, it's a little longer than that.
Yeah, packed with portent and with doom and with it's.
And it has 3 times as many female characters as the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, actually, it's really astonishing considering it came out in 1954. And it's like I said, it's freighted with omens and with that sort of Ragnarok sense of the winding down of not merely personal destinies but family destinies and clan destinies and world destinies.
Cattle die, kinsmen die, even the gods must one day die.
It's steeped in that icy fatalism that only sort of occasionally pops up in the Lord of the Rings.
That's the tagline for the Thorn of Emberlane.
Yeah,
steeped in that icy fatalism.
Only occasionally pops up in Lord of the Rings, like specifically coming out of the mouths of the Rohirrim. Like when they're about to charge at Pelennor Fields, they're not yelling, for king and country and bright sunshine. They're yelling death, death. So that's a Broken Sword, which we've suddenly turned into Paul Anderson's cheering section.
It happens.
But yeah, I mean, I don't. When the term grimdark first came into currency, I mean, my understanding was that it was intended to be, parodic. It was intended to be, sarcastic, and it has sort of become a thing. And I suppose that people who like that sort of thing will always, find a label for that sort of thing and seek that sort of thing. And I wanted to write fantasy that felt grounded and fantasy that felt a little bit dangerous. Fantasy in which the characters and the situations would be full of genuine risk. Which is why I do occasionally surprising and brutal things to characters. Sorry.
Genuine Risk, a great American racehorse of the 1980s.
But I don't. I love you.
I'm sorry.
You're so adorable. We're having technical difficulties. Hold on one second. You and your non sequitur bomb goes off. All thought is destroyed. Where am I? Who are you people?
I've got a segue question for you if you want.
No, hold on.
I'm sorry. You're still rambling.
I'm still continuing my laser sharp insights into what it is that we're doing here. You can ramble aimlessly when we're finished, crazy woman. Anyhow, no.
I invite anyone at home to time the amount of time Scott spends talking and the amount of time that I spend talking.
Well, I have to dance around your distractions, so I heard you too. Okay. Wow, the viewer number is just plummeting. Wow, it's
plummeting.
Like okay. Anyway.
Oh, they're back.
Oh, wow, we gained one. Holy shit, how'd that happen? Are you lost, little viewer, or are you confused?
What are you doing here?
Perhaps you were looking for some other authors. Anyhow,
Joe Abercrombie's.
No one's looking for Joe Abercrombie's Hangout. Let's be honest. Okay, so. But what I don't want, what I'm not after is a cheap and cynical approach to things, if that makes sense. I'm not interested in the notion of shocking for shock's sake alone. I think that's a pretty puerile bourgeois sentiment to have, that sort of idea that if I don't put shocking things into my books, where will my comforted and cosseted readers find shocking things? You'll find them in the fricking newspaper, for God's sake. My job is to provide an emotional roller coaster. My job is to provide catharsis after doing the catharsis. These are the yin and yang of the gentleman bastard sequence. And I think that there are certain examples of modern fantasy in the what we call the grimdark vein that go a little too far in the cynical, look at what a bad boy I am, ha ha ha, look at how many people we kill, how many people we rape, et cetera, et cetera. That I mean, it's just that's not me. That's not what I'm interested in. That's not what I'm after. And I think that the difference is passion versus cynicism. And
yeah, imagine what Scott would be like if he were actually trying to kill characters. Just to shock you.
Yeah, mostly
just hold that in your heart for a moment and be grateful.
Mostly it's an accident and incompetence at this point. But if I was really trying to kill little bastards, and the other thing about labels, like grimdark, is that whenever any number of authors start pulling in a certain direction, and like I said, it's that reaction counter reaction thing. I wasn't the only person reading Game of Thrones. I wasn't the only person contrasting it with stuff I've read years before. So there's 4 or 5 or 7 or 10 or 15. Eventually, you have a number of people actually contributing professionally to the field who've all sort of grown up with the same notions of engaging with and maybe.
We're hemorrhaging viewers again. Wrap this question up.
No, they're back. They're back. We're watching them live, and maybe dealing with these issues. And it's not necessarily a conscious thing. It's not necessarily a movement. It's critics and commentators who attempt to apply labels to things like, oh, this is the new weird. I mean, new weird was the big thing when I first started publishing, and now it's grimdark. And the thing is that very few of us actually get up in the morning and say, now it's time to contribute to the new weird, or boy, I'm going to do some grimdark today. I mean, movements tend to be defined after the books have already come out. And I'm not here to join movements. I'm just here to produce the books I want to produce.
All right. This is actually a question that is not intended as a follow-up, but I'm going to put it here as a follow-up because it follows.
Displaying your moderator skills.
All right. Both. This is for both of us. What responsibilities do you have toward the notion of realism in genre fiction? Does genre have to be, quote, more real now than it was before? Quote, more real, unquote, than it was before.
I invite Elizabeth Bear to start us off.
Oh, okay. I figured you would just continue on in the same vein you had been going in. Now I get an answer. Under the bus. I don't think I have any notion. I think realism is kind of a bugaboo. The way art works, you make something that seems more real than actual reality by taking something, putting a frame around it, and cutting out most of the extraneous material. And this is why Ansel Adams' photograph of a birch tree looks so much better than my photograph of a birch tree. It's because he knows where to put the frame, how to set up the lighting, and how to make that birch tree look actually more real than just a snapshot, which is an accurate representation. There's some people who are really good at those things that look like snapshots. My art firm comes to mind. Her work which is not genre work as we know it. She's a slice of life screenwriter. That's work that intentionally presents what looks like a very cluttered family snapshot photograph kind of thing, but is incredibly artful. And it's incredibly hard to do that stuff well. It's like naturalistic dialogue is incredibly hard to do well because you have to cut all of the clutter, all of the ums and ahs, all of the circularity, all of the stuff I'm doing right now out of that dialogue to make it sound natural while still creating something that is interesting to listen to and sounds like something you just hear on the subway. Over to you, Scott.
A vagrant, forsooth. Pardon me, just a moment. Sorry. I rub my eyes here.
Okay,
still waking up.
More coffee.
Yes, more coffee would help.
I love how I've got the giant face-hiding mug here. Oh, what happens if I talk into the mug?
Everyone's
I
notion.
sound like Scott.
You don't sound anything like me.
He's naturally resonant.
You only say that because I talk like this all the time. No. It's everyone's notion of what realism denote, going to be wildly divergent. But when it comes to, I mean, the subject of realism, I tend to think of it as sort of a give and take with the reader. I think of it as sort of a, you ground the fantastical with as many suitable details as you possibly can. You try to purchase reader suspension of disbelief. And you do this by setting up a conscious or unconscious feeling of trust in the reader that you know what you're talking about and you've done the research. And you don't describe horses riding 3 days and 3 nights and being really happy about it, and not having to take any time off, barring the intrusion of magic or so on and so forth. I mean, horses, for example, a highly technical subject about which a lot of fantasy readers know a great deal, which certain fans have occasionally really screwed up. Horses are not just fuzzy motorcycles that you can park wherever you want, leave them there for 4 days, come back, get them.
They're not.
Drive them 1,000 miles, without
crap,
complaints.
I gotta stop writing
They don't eat anything, they don't crap. If you cover those kinds of details and you give the reader the impression that, oh, this person knows what they're really talking about, this person has handled horses, or give the reader details to make the world seem realistic, or at least like you're putting in the effort. And then when you throw something totally wild in there, like the magic or the wuxia kung fu or the dragon or whatever, that fantastical detail is buoyed upon the grounding that you've given with the other details. They'll buy the fantastical thing more readily because you've done the work elsewhere. And it doesn't feel like you're totally half-assing everything and pulling it out of your nether regions.
This is actually a spot where I think both of us disagree strongly with George Martin, which is rare because he's really smart and a really good writer. But possibly I'm misinterpreting what he said, but he said something once about nobody cares where the potatoes come from. I do. I care very deeply where the potatoes come from, and if the climate will support them, and if the economics of trade will support having potatoes in this climate.
Yes.
I'm misquoting George. I can't remember what he actually said.
Let's just assume
he sells about 70 million times as many books as I do, so don't take my word over his.
Let's assume for the sake of argument that we're right and George is wrong. So wrong. Buy our books, don't buy his books, because we're right about potatoes. No, I mean, this is. I do agree with the caveat that. I mean, there are readers out there who care where the potatoes come from. I mean, everyone has weird factual fetishes. Like, I'm really interested. I'm really interested in medieval and Renaissance economics, which is why, all the bits in counting houses and all the bits of people, trading little pieces of paper and arguing about, commercial futures and arrangements and so on and so forth in my books were, just hilarious fun for me to write. And I recognize that these are hilarious fun for about 6 other people on Earth. So I try to kind of keep it toned down.
But it's also why the Gentleman Bastard books are Renaissance rather than High Medieval.
Yes.
Because you have to have an economy.
But that's a totally different subject.
Oh, okay.
From I mean, it's a totally segue.
Hey, Scott, a rabbit hole. You want to go down it?
No, I do not. It's how can I put this? You don't actually have to have 3 pages on where the potatoes come from. You don't have to have, chapter 1, the potato farmer that feeds King's Landing.
Although KJ Parker could do a good job.
Well, KJ Parker could do it because KJ Parker is, some sort of alien overmind living among us. And you don't necessarily need to show all the nuts and bolts of here's the cloth dyeing process that results in the cloaks that the Rohirrim wear. You need to give the impression that somewhere in the world there's a reasonable place for these potatoes to come from. And that the characters in the world who eat them know that they come from someplace and they don't just magically fall from the sky. You're not wandering through, medieval England, 1251, and you don't see a gigantic stall of fresh supermarket potatoes straight out of the 21st century being sold for 10 gold pieces apiece.
It's 8:35 and we have 2 more questions to get through.
Okay.
This one's for me?
Well, skip that one.
Oh.
Okay.
That one.
Elizabeth, you write both fantasy and SF. Do you prefer one over the other? Do you enjoy pushing against the expectations of each in your writing, and do you approach them in the same way?
I'm a weirdo, actually, in that I don't necessarily see a genre distinction, like a larger genre distinction between the subcategories of what we refer to generally as speculative fiction or science fiction / fantasy, which is to say, narrative fiction that contains some sort of a genre element, or a speculative element in this case. And in large part, this is because I'm a third generation science fiction fantasy fan on both sides of my family. Both of my grandfathers were science fiction fans. My mom and my dad are both science fiction and fantasy fans. And so I grew up in a house full of ratty old paperback novels, everything from Howard to Vance to Varley to Joanna Russ. I'm what happens when you give an 8-year-old Joanna Russ with no supervision.
Give more 8-year-olds Joanna Russ novels.
Feel like you're cultivating my replacement. Oh, his evil plot comes clean.
Well, we need someone to carry your sedan chair when you are
fair
proclaimed empress of the genre.
Okay, I'm on board. I don't think there is an empress of science fiction.
Not yet. We're working on it.
Okay.
Well, Ursula
There's
K. Le Guin.
there's a queen of cyberpunk, Pat Cadigan. Anyway, sorry. And so for me, I do actually approach them in very similar ways. I approach them as you have a world, it has a set of physical rules, which may be plausible science as we know it, or maybe some totally made up stuff. And sometimes the rules are, well, this feels like it would be right in a fairy tale. That's a good enough magical rule for me. Sometimes the rules are, Brandon Sanderson, you could actually cast these spells. Once you're 8th level, you can cast these spells.
Here's your god book.
Here's your god book. Yeah, exactly. And then what you do is you test those rules and you test that world and you put your characters into situations where even if they have special abilities, those special abilities may make things worse, may make things more complicated. And I look at it all as a process of sort of testing to destruction, testing your characters to destruction, testing your world building to destruction, seeing what cool things you can come up with to do with the stuff in your world. And also, unexplained bits. There's unexplained bits in our world. We don't understand a lot of things. We don't understand how Alzheimer's works, although there's some recent research in a couple of directions that's very interesting. And pushing that stuff, pushing those edges is, I think, where the stories are. Am I done?
That was pretty good.
Okay, excellent. I've come to a reasonable conclusion.
Good job, you.
All right, last question for both of us, which is, do you read each other's work?
Oh, no, I don't want to feel bad about myself.
Do you have a favorite book of the others? Is it different to the favorite of the other? I'd like to answer this one first if I can.
You answer this one.
Okay, I'm in business.
That way I know how to not get in trouble.
Yes, we do read each other's work. Scott is one of my first readers, and corrects all my firefighting nonsense for me. The epic house fire in Care and Memory may have been influenced by spoilers. There's an epic house fire. Something burns down. Something burns.
I consult
the hell
on
down.
burning things.
Yes, he's really, really useful when it comes to burning things. And I consult on ponies. My favorite book of Scott's is actually unfinished. And it's this thing that's, what is it called, Scott? Queen of the Iron something?
It's called, I'm deleting it later this afternoon.
Oh, okay.
No, it's called Queen of the Iron Sands.
And it's available online on his website. It's his take on it's his science fiction novel, sort of. It's his take on early pulp, first contact Mars exploration novels, and I love it. I love it passionately. I love it with all my heart. Someday I'll get to read the end of it. And but of Scott's published books, I think Republic of Thieves is the best. I think it's got mature art and craft and a bunch of other things going on in it, and characterization. However, I will say that long before Scott and I were a romantic item, we had the same editor, and I was a new young writer at that point in time. I think I was either up for the Campbell Award or I just won it. And my editor handed me a copy of this book, an arc of this book called The Lies of Locke Lamore. And I had met Scott once at that point in time and said, here, read this, you'll like it. And I get a lot of ARCs. And I sort of left it lying around. And I'm like, oh yeah, that was the guy who was really funny at Convergence and was really nice to me. I'll read his book. So I opened it and I started reading it. And I was really actually very much getting into it. And I had to go to meet some friends for archery practice. So I took the book with me and I was reading it while I was waiting for them. I left it in my locker at Hall Archery in Manchester, Connecticut, because there are a lot of Manchesters in the US too. And I had to, which was half an hour from where I lived by car. And so I got home, realized I had left the book there, had to drive all the way back in rush hour traffic to get this dratted book because the cliffhangers were driving me nuts. So you and your cliffhangers.
Okay, well.
So yes, I liked, and I blurbed it. I blurbed this book. Hi. I liked him even when.
Well, now I'll have to say something nice about you because you said something nice about me.
It's like I like him.
Well, okay. The thing about Elizabeth Bear is that she's written so many books in so many different genres and genre blends that I'm going to have to give you several different recommendations. I'm extremely fond of a short story collection called Shoggoths in Bloom, and this is also more than a little bit nepotistic because I got to write the introduction for this book, so I got to be really hyper cute about her in what I like to think is a fairly lucid and erudite overview of what makes her work tick. So, I mean, if you want to know why I like her work, I spell it all out in this book. There's an essay. There is. It's basically an essay. And it's also it's a really good short fiction overview of basically all the notes that she hits and every reason that she's special. Oh. And it also contains at least one story that won a Hugo, the title story too. 2 Hugos. And it also contains
both of them.
What I think is your favorite short story of your own output, which is Sonny Liston Takes the Fall. Yes,
so far my favorite. Although Covenant is maybe giving it a run for its money at this point.
When it comes to novels, in terms of her fantasy stuff, definitely the Eternal Sky sequence. And when it comes to science fiction, I'm going to throw out a novel called Carnival, which is essentially
available from Gollancz,
which is also available from Gollancz. Should be available in a recently reissued ebook edition as we speak. You can have it in your hands in just a few moments. And Carnival is a not particularly slam bang, but it shows our a mutual passion that we share for these sort of John le Carre-esque
It's my spy thriller.
Yeah. It's her far future post singularity gay action space heroes in a Jean le Carre espionage setting, i.e. the whole
gunslinging diplomats.
We're stuck in 7 layers of subterfuge at every point in our life. Why do we do this? Trying to sort themselves out, their mission out, and their relationship out on a really interesting planet that is kind of antithetical to the society that they come from. And it's just so marvelously multi-layered and so marvelously twisty and yet so vibrantly science fictional. It's difficult for me not to be fond of it. So yeah, Carnival, the Eternal Sky sequence, and Shoggoths in Bloom.
When I initially pitched Carnival, I pitched it as I want to put a Joanna Russ book and a Robert Heinlein book in a box and poke them with sticks until they fight.
Yeah, basically. and I want Space Christopher Marlowe in it, running around being a secret agent. I mean, maybe not quite that.
Oh, okay. There is a secret agent. There's several secret agents.
There are a few.
2 secret agents and a diplomat.
Yeah,
who are co-protagonists. Gunslinging diplomat. I love her.
Hey, co-protagonist, how's it going?
Hey, co-protagonist.
Anyway.
I think we've co-protagged our way through the interview.
We have.
Are we allowed to go now? Should we wrap up?
It's been more than an hour, and we do have a rigorous schedule of lazing around and messing about.
You have a lot of reading to do, and I have a novel to edit.
I do. I start teaching on Mondays, so I've got a number of student stories to read and prepare for critiques and so on and so forth for my sins. We attract generally a wonderful bunch of students here, operating at a relatively high level of ability. So it will not be a chore.
Yes.
It will just take time.
So many manuscripts.
So many manuscripts.
Actually,
Meanwhile, she's going to be eating bonbons, on the deck.
No, I'm going to be editing my next novel. Actually, before we go, the computer that the webcam is attached to is actually currently propped up on a pile of these manuscripts, so that you're not looking up our noses, because we love you that much. We love you enough not to give you the up the nose webcam shot before breakfast.
After breakfast, though, that's all you get.
That's all you get.
That's all you get in the future.
It's not. It's after breakfast for them.
Oh, true.
No,
true.
Here.
All right. I still love you.
Shall we sign off?
Okay.
Are
yes. Yes. We're done. This is it. We've got to run. It's been lovely. Thank you for hanging out with us.
Yes. Thank you all for coming out, and we hope the rest of Gollancz Fest is awesome for you.